The prophet Habakkuk writes, the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it. But nobody, especially faithful people, nobody really wants to wait for too long, especially con los brazos cruzados and tapping your feet and staring at your watches. You want to make something happen, so that's what I want to talk about for the brief moments I have with you this evening. That we're all invited to imagine and create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it. Mother Teresa's diagnosis of the world's ills, I think, was quite correct when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we imagine together a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle? And to that end, what we're all called to do is to stand at the very edges of the margins of that circle and hope that because we're standing there, it will widen. And we stand with specific people out there on the margins, the poor, the powerless, the voiceless. We stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. We stand with those whose dignity has been denied. When you're really fortunate and blessed and lucky, you get to stand occasionally with the easily despised and the readily left out, with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. I don't believe this is my call. I think this is our call. It's a human call. I suspect if kinship was our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice, we would be celebrating it. So for the last quarter of a century, all these potted plants seem to be moving over here. A miracle in our midst. Oh no, there are people dragging them, sorry. So for 25 years I've worked with gang members. It's been the great privilege of my life to do so. And I've learned everything of importance from them in the last 25 years. But nothing more important really than in this last year, they've taught me how to text. And I couldn't be more grateful. You know, it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And so I'm pretty good at it. Whoever would have thought, you know, LOL and OMG and BTW. And there's a new one that the homies have taught me, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh hell no. And I've been using that one quite a bit lately. So there I am with two homies, Manuel and Poncho, and we're driving to Palm Desert, and we're going to give a talk at a high school. And older vatos who've worked for me for a time do a variety of things, been to prison, tattooed. And so we're about, you know, we meet at 9 to drive to this high school in Palm Desert. So it's about 9:15. Manuel's in the front seat, and I can hear incoming, you know, zzz, he's getting a text. And he reads the text and he sort of chuckles. I go, what is it? Oh gosh, it's dumb. It's Snoopy back at the office. And well, we just left Snoopy. Snoopy greeted me at 9 o'clock, gave me a big abrazo. And Snoopy and Manuel work together in the clock-in room where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of our workers. And I said, well, what's it say? Oh, God, it's stupid. Hang on. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy. So we died laughing, you know, and then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. No kinship, no peace. No kinship, no justice. No matter how singularly focused you may well be on those two worthy goals, they won't happen unless there's kinship. A deep and a pervasive sense that somehow we are in this together, that there is no us and them. It's just us. And that we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we're separate. And so our task always is to bridge any kind of space there is between us. it was one of the great privileges of my life to know Cesar Chavez. And I remember once a reporter was commenting to him. I said, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And he shrugged and he smiled and he said, it's mutual. And that's sort of what we're aiming for, is a mutuality in kinship where there is no space. We seek a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So, at a place like Pepperdine, everybody, of course, is dedicated to service and Christian service. But there's even distance in service, if you think about it. You know, it's service provider, service recipient. You want to bridge even that. You also want to acknowledge that service is the hallway. It don't stop. It's supposed to get you to the ballroom, which is kinship. I remember there was a homie named Caesar. Everybody called him Dreamer, and he was a little knucklehead gang member in the Pico Gardens housing projects, and I watched him grow up there. And very funny kid, dangerous sense of humor. Got into a gang and in and out of being locked up, mainly selling drugs, using drugs mainly. And this one time nobody's been employed more through Homeboy, I suppose, than this guy Caesar. And so this one time he finished like an 8-month stretch in prison for a violation, and he came out and he says what homies often say, this time it'll be different. I said, all right. So I call a friend of mine who runs a vending machine company in Alhambra, and he hires him right away. Well, 2 weeks later, Caesar's in my office, and he's proudly waving his very first paycheck. And he goes, damn, gee, this paycheck makes me feel proper. I mean, my mom, she's proud of me, and my kids, they're not ashamed of me, and, well, you know who I have to thank for this job. And I said, gosh, who? And he looked at me strangely and he said, well, God, of course. I said, oh, sure, yeah. No, that's right, yeah, God. And he said, you thought I was going to say you, didn't you? I said, no, gosh, God's absolutely number one, yeah. He said, you are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days. I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, yeah, because God would have had struck down your ass already by now, he says. We fall out of our chairs. We're just dying laughing. And I defy you to identify who is the service provider and who is the service recipient. It's mutual. It's mutual. Homeboy Industries was born in 1988 during the time I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, nestled in the middle of 2 public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. And together they comprised the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs in those 2 housing projects, which is unheard of. Usually you have 1, not 8. And half of them at war with the other half. Leading the LAPD to deem this area the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city was my parish, little did I know. So I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988, and I buried my 174th about a month ago. Not all from that community, of course, but because I know a lot of gang members, I get asked to do this. So we started to do things as a parish. We had junior high age gang members who had been given the boot from their home school, and so they were wreaking havoc in the project, so we started our own junior high. And that brought gang members to the church, which sort of jostled the notion of what a church was, you know, hermetically sealed, good people in, bad people out, and that was a challenge to all of us. And then the gang members said if only we had jobs, and so all of us, myself and the women mainly, we went marching around the factories that surrounded the projects in search of felony-friendly employers, and that wasn't so forthcoming. So we couldn't wait. You know, we started a project here and a project there and built a child care center and did graffiti removal, a lot of things, and then we started our first business in 92, a Homeboy Bakery right across the street from the church, an old abandoned bakery. 1 month later, we had Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market. Once we had plural, we came up with the highfalutin Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this venture. And then we were off and running. We were good to go. And now, go figure, we're the largest gang intervention program, reentry and rehab center in the US of A. We didn't set out to do that. We've just sort of backed our way into it. Not every business we tried was successful. You know, Homeboy Plumbing was not a huge success, as I recall. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. Sleep at the wheel. And we just responded, you know, concretely to anything that came up. You know, like tattoo removal. There's no place on the planet Earth that removes more tattoos than Homeboy Industries. And we have a dedicated clinic, state-of-the-art equipment, 3 laser machines, 12 doctors, 4,000 laser treatments a year, 4,000 patients who are currently ongoing to get their treatments, 3,000 awaiting even their first treatment. No place on the planet removes more tattoos, and it all began because of a guy named Frank who wandered out of Corcoran State Prison. I'm behind my desk, and he 2 days out of prison, and he's sitting there in front of me and tattooed on his forehead, and pardon my French, "Fuck the world," from here to here to here to here, like a billboard. And he said, "You know, I am having a hard time finding a job." And I said, "Well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one, you know." And I'm imagining, "Do you want fries with that?" And "No, we don't want fries with that." So I hired him immediately, and he worked at my bakery, and he just, in a little corner of the bakery, he would just bag bread. And then I went in search of you know, a doctor who'd be willing to deal with Frank's angriest moment in his life, you know, and I found one at White Memorial Hospital. He gave me 1 hour every 3 months. And pretty soon I had a waiting list of 2,000 people, and so we grew from that point, and now we're quite large. We owe it all to Frank, who, parentheses, showed up in my office not long ago. He's now a security guard at a movie studio, and there's not even the slightest trace of this outburst on his forehead. And all of us are a whole lot more than the angriest, stupidest, dumbest thing we ever did. And so we have all our curricular things, from anger management to parenting, you name it, we have it. Case management, a mental health, huge mental health team, solar panel installation training program, our businesses, bakery, silkscreen, Homeboy Homegirl merchandise where we sell our logo stuff, and Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. And they cater all the way out here, so keep that in mind. My favorite story still in the last 6 months was Oscar-winning actress Diane Keaton showed up for lunch one day. She had never been to Homegirl Cafe. She came with a regular, a guy who's there once a week. And her waitress this day is Glinda, and Glinda is a homegirl, been there, done that, tattooed, gang member, been to prison, felon, parolee. She doesn't know who Diane Keaton is. So she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, "Well, what do you recommend?" And Glinda rattles off, you know, her 3 platillos that she especially likes. And Diane Keaton says, "Well, I like that one, the second one." And then something dawns on Glinda. She looks at Diane Keaton and says, "Wait a minute, I feel like I know you, like we've met somewhere." And Diane Keaton deflects it humbly. "Oh gosh, I don't know, I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before." And then Glinda goes, "No, now I know. We were locked up together." That just took my breath away when I heard it. And I don't believe there's been any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. In fact, this is what's on God's mind. Jesus says very plainly, that you may be one. He could have said a lot of other things that were perhaps more self-referential, but he doesn't. He just says that you may be one. It's about you. It's about us. It's about obliteration of the idea that there might be a them. All of us are called to be what Alice Miller, the late great child psychologist, called enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. You don't hold the bar up and ask people to measure up. You show up and you hold the mirror up and you tell the truth, knowing that my truth is your truth and your truth is a gang member's truth, and it's all the same truth. And here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And so you become that truth, and you watch those on the margins inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce that. No 4 prison walls can keep that out. And death can't touch it because it's really that huge. But occasionally you have to reach in and dismantle messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that weigh folks down. The scripture scholar Marcus Borg, I think, is quite correct when he suggests that the principal suffering of the poor throughout scripture and throughout history is shame and disgrace. And I think he's quite right. I'm in 25 different detention facilities where I do Catholic services on a rotating basis, all the probation camps, juvenile halls, youth authority facilities, hand out my card. Usually on a Saturday I'll have 2 masses way out in Las Afueras in the boonies. But then I have to race back on Saturday. This Saturday will be exactly as most Saturdays. Because I've been there 25 years, I know a lot of people, gang members in particular. I get asked to do stuff. So every Saturday looks almost identical. 1 o'clock, whatever, baptism. 2 o'clock, quinceañera. 3 o'clock, wedding. 4 o'clock, exorcism. Just checking to see if you're listening still. I've never done one of those in my whole life. Anyway, so I race back one Saturday and it's 20 minutes to 1 and I think, oh gosh, you know, I got time to go to my office, which was on 1st Street then. I just opened my mail by myself. And so I do, I race over there. Ooh, I'm contento, feliz, sitting in my office going through my mail. When suddenly, this woman barges through the front door. I find out her name is Lisa. She's 34 34 years old. This is the first time she's ever stepped foot in my office. Everybody's seen her around. She's kind of a famous street person, prostitute, heroin addict, gang member, tattooed, felon, parolee. Something of a famous gritona and peleonera. She's always fighting. She's always screaming. You'll hear her screaming as they toss her out of the bar next door. You can hear her screaming into a payphone on 1st Street, "Just let me stay tonight," pleading with family or friends. And this is the first time she's ever stepped foot in my office. And now it's 7 minutes to 1. She barrels right through. I'm behind my desk. She plunks herself down in a chair over there. She launches right in. "I need help." Ooh, I've been to like 50 rehabs. I'm known all over, nationwide. Went to Catholic schools all my life. Graduated from elementary, she says. I even graduated from Sacred Heart High School in Lincoln Heights. And then she gets quiet and still. In fact, first time I ever used heroin was right after I graduated. And I've been trying to stop since the moment I began. And I watched as she leaned her head against the wall behind her. And her eyes become like 2 ponds, water rising to meet its edges and spilling over. And she cries and she cries. Until finally she levels her gaze at me and she says with great deliberation, "I am a disgrace." And suddenly her shame meets mine. Because when I had seen her step into my office that afternoon, I had mistaken her for an interruption. It's mutual. I grew up in LA. Wonderful parents, 5 sisters, 2 brothers. We lived in a big old house. And I remember my mom used to say, "Don't go to the attic." Of course, you know, this is all kids need to hear. We were shortly thereafter selling tickets to the attic, you know, so. So one day when she wasn't looking, we went up in the attic, you know, so she was gone and we went up there and it was kind of precarious and dangerous, hence the prohibition, I guess. But we were rummaging through boxes and we found this old clunky record. One song recorded on this huge thing and the label said, "Oh Holy Night, the Christmas Carol." And then underneath it said, Kathleen Conway, my mom's maiden name. So we raced downstairs and we put it on our little kitty's phonograph and we encircle the speakers and, you know, resting our chins on our fists. And we couldn't believe our ears that when this needle hits the record and through the scratchiness, we discover that our mom, before she decided to have 8 kids, was an opera singer. And we just couldn't believe that this glorious voice belonged to the same woman who hollered at us, you know. So, so we played the grooves off this thing, and I did anyway. And a mantra was born. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. If we think it's just about Christmas, we miss the point. If we think it's just about Jesus, boy, do we miss the point. It's about us appearing, and the soul feels the worth because we've chosen to appear. It has to mean that. Jesus insists on it. A homie who was kind of the most resistant to my offers of help was a kid named Bandit. And he was well earned his name. I would ride my bike in the middle of the night in Aliso Village housing projects, and I could see Bandit run up to a car and sell crack cocaine, and then walk away from the car counting his money. And then he'd see me. "How about a real job?" "Well, I'm okay, G, thanks." Very polite. Until 15 years ago, Bandit shows up in my office, and I couldn't believe he was there. And he says what gang members often say, "I'm tired of being tired." So I walk him to one of our 4 job developers, and as luck would have it, they locate an entry-level job, low pay, first kind of job in a warehouse. Now cut to today. Bandit's the head supervisor of the whole shooting match. He runs the whole deal. He owns his own home. He's married. He has 3 kids. And I hadn't heard from him in like 2 years, and so no news is good news, usually with gang members. But he calls me on a Friday afternoon, a little bit breathless and panicky. "Hey, G, you gotta bless my daughter." "¿Qué pasó, mijo? Is she sick? Is she in the hospital?" "Oh, no. On Sunday, she's going to Humboldt College." Imagine, my oldest, my Jessica, she's going to college. "But she's a little chaparita and we're afraid for her because that's Humboldt, that's way north, that's far. Do you think you could give her a blessing before she leaves?" I go, "Are you kidding? I'd be honored. Look, tomorrow's Saturday, I have an exorcism at 1. Why don't you come at 12:30 and we'll do a little send-off, you know." And sure enough, they all show up at 12:30, and I put Jessica in front of the altar, and I said, "Let's surround her with our bodies and our love." And let's everybody touch her, connect to her, hold her arms, put your hands on her shoulders, on her head. Everybody touch her. And close your eyes and bow your heads. And as the homies say, I do a long-ass prayer. I go on. And somewhere in the middle of this prayer, I notice that we've all become chillones. You know, we're all crying. I don't know why we're crying. Except for the fact that Bandit and his wife don't know anybody who's ever gone to college, except me. Certainly nobody in their families. So, you know, I wipe my tears and we kind of laugh about how mushy we got, you know, and so to change the subject, I turned to Jessica. Hey, what are you going to study at Humboldt College? She was very quick. Forensic psychology. I go, damn, forensic psychology. And Bandit chimes in, yeah, she wants to study the criminal mind. And Jessica, very deadpan, turns and looks at her father and she does one of these, you know. And he sees her and he gets the joke and he says, yeah, I'm going to be her first subject. So we walk out to the car in big abrazos and everybody piles in the car. And Bandit hangs back and I'm glad he has. And I say, hey, can I tell you something? I give you credit for the man you've chosen to become, for choosing to walk in your own footsteps. I'm proud of you. And his eyes fill up with tears and he says, ¿Sabes qué? I'm proud of myself. All my life, people called me a lowlife, a bueno para nada, a good for nothing. I guess I showed them. I said, yeah, I guess you did. And the soul feels its worth. Exactly right. If you stand at the margins long enough, brace yourself. People will accuse you of wasting your time. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. And how is that not the job description of everybody in this hot library, but to make those voices heard? I'm going to just tell one story more. It's a little long one, so it'll fill up my time. But it's sort of a Shaggy dog story, but which is to say all of it's true, but it's Shaggy. And then I'm going to allow 15 minutes or so for questions. And then we'll be through. And then you can buy all those books that nice gentleman over there is selling. Thank you for buying this book, Tattoos on the Heart, for those of you who have. And if you go and buy up all the books that are left and it suddenly becomes Tuesdays with Homie, or the Purpose-Driven Homie, or something like that, then I can keep my doors open at Homeboy, which is quite the struggle. So the book came out a year ago, and the paperback came out February, and the audio version came out on March 1. And they wanted George Clooney, but they got me. So, but the month before the book came out, in the mail, I get my one copy of the hardcover, and so homies are always in my office. There are about 6 of them, and I'm opening the mail. Hey, here's my book. So I'm passing it around, and they're trying to find their name in it, you know. And Simon & Schuster forced me to change all the names for some reason, thinking the homies would sue me. It didn't make any sense to me, but I did it. So they're looking for their names, and they're reading different things. So on the book, on the hardcover anyway, my editor got all these nice people to say nice things about the book. I'm going to presume maybe they read the book even. So on the cover, it's Anne Lamott has a nice little blurb, and on the back is Marion Wright Edelman and Carrie Kennedy and a variety of other people they got. But at the top is Jack Kornfield, who's just a great man, a psychologist, philosopher, Buddhist. And he has like 3 sentences or something in his blurb. And the first sentence is an effusive sentence filled with adjectives that I'll spare you. But the second sentence begins this way. Father Boyle, the Gandhi of the gangs. So when this book gets in the hands of Pasquale, we call him Pasky, a gang member I've known since he was a kid, and he graduated from Northridge. And he runs our parenting division. Apparently, part of his job description is to take me down a notch. So he sees this and he goes, "The Gandhi of the gangs, like this is way over the top, you know." So the next day he emails me and he says, "Here's a blurb for your book. This book is astounding. Father Boyle is the Sarah Palin of the gangs. In fact, he can see Mexico from his back porch." So I immediately forwarded this to my editor, and I said, "Please, I beg you, put this on the paperback edition." And she just sent me back very simply, "OHN." And that seemed to be the end of it. All right, promised shaggy dog story, and then get your questions ready. In the book, some of you have, I was in San Diego last night, and this became like a hit that people, it's a most requested story, sort of. And it was late, and boy, was I tired, and they said, "Tell it," so I'm not as tired, and it's not that late. So anyway, in a regime that you may have recalled, it was about 5 years ago, when Laura Bush was the First Lady of the land. She came and visited Homeboy Industries. Now, she was visiting around the country, a variety of after-school programs, mentoring programs and such. We were the only gang intervention program she visited. And the Secret Service determined that the headquarters at Homeboy was too porous to be secured. So they decided that this visit had to take place at the Homeboy Silkscreen factory, which is a factory kind of off campus, if you will. And the day of her visit, it was unbelievable. Bomb-sniffing dogs, sharpshooters on the roofs of all the surrounding factories, sharpshooters in the rafters of the building aimed at the homies whenever the homies were walking. These guns were pointed at them. It was incredible. Well, 2 weeks before the visit, the head of the Secret Service division, a kind of a Clint Eastwood type looking guy, came to me and said, "Father, only 50 people can be a part of this thing." Well, I had 400 and plus people, and I thought, oh gosh, really? Yeah, only 50. So yeah, you're going to have to make a list. Their names, their birth dates, their social security numbers. So we decided to declare undocumented worker day off day on that day. You know, we'll see you the following day. And so I compiled my list, and I handed it to Clint. And 2 days later, he shows up, and he's hemming and hawing and looking more severe than I recall him looking. And he's going, "Wow, yeah, Father, these people have records," he says to me, like this news might come as a surprise to me, you know. And I said, "Well, at Homeboy Industries, it's sort of the idea, you know." So anyway, the visit went off without a hitch, and everybody felt quite good about themselves. Well, 3 months later, I get a phone call from the White House, a staffer in the First Lady's office, and she says, "Father Boyle, Mrs. Bush is sponsoring a national conference at Howard University in Washington, D.C. called Helping America's Youth. And people are coming from all over the country. And she would like you to be one of the 3 keynote speakers." I said, "Gosh, I'd be honored." "Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. Mrs. Bush would like you to bring 3 homies with you." Now, whether the First Lady of the United States used the H word, I can't be certain. And she said afterwards, a select group of participants, not everybody, but a select group of participants will go into the White House afterwards for dinner. Now, certainly crooks have resided in this house before, but it may well be the first time gang members have ever stepped foot in there. So I went in search among my 427 workers for 3 of the most menacing looking gang members I could, just to mess with the White House a little bit. How many opportunities do you get to do that, you know? So I picked Gabriel, Gus, and Herbie. And 3 guys have been to prison, large vatos who do a variety of things for me. And they'd never been on a plane. They had never been to D.C., of course. And so I call them in and I said, "Hey, you're going to the White House for dinner, so you can't exactly wear size 85 waist Dickies, you know. We're going to have to get you suits." Of course, where are you going to go? Men's Warehouse. You're gonna like the way you look, I guarantee it, you know. Well, that guy wasn't there, but we walk into the Burbank Men's Warehouse, myself and these three, and I swear to you, every single solitary salesperson rushes us at the door as if to say, now how may we help the three of you leave our store as quickly as possible? I said, well, they're having dinner at the White House, you know, and yeah, right, sure. So they dispatch them into dressing rooms, and I'm out there picking through ties, and the first of our group, Gabriel, appears, and he's in a perfectly fitted light gray suit, and he's standing in front of a six-sided mirror, just staring at himself, mouth wide open. Now, Gabriel at the time was about 25 years old. He doesn't work for us anymore. He's moved on to bigger and better things. He was, you know, into his neighborhood. His gang was tattooed clear across his neck, filling the entire space from jawbone to collarbone to ear, also on his face. He had many tattoo removal treatments. Married, 3 kids. He did a lot of things for us, but he was mainly our premier tour guide. And nobody gave better tours. We get about 5 to 10 tours a day at Homeboy. So he would wait for you at the front door, and he'd greet you with his $1 million smile. And he'd introduce you to the job developers. And he'd hand you goggles so you could watch tattoos being removed on the premises. He'd hand you a hairnet so you could watch enemy rival gang members baking bread together. He'd take you into the cafe and tell you what his favorite dishes were. He gave great tours, but quite apart from his ability to give a tour was the nature and quality and character of his heart. Golden, pure, innocent, though the packaging might suggest otherwise. In fact, the day won't ever come when I am more noble or have more courage or am closer to God than this guy Gabriel. So I walk up to him, I tap him on his shoulder. Are you okay? And he doesn't take his eyes off the guy in the suit. And he says, damn, gee, I'm already pinching myself. Like you can't believe he's in a suit. Can't believe he's headed to the White House. Well, I bought the tickets months in advance, but 2 weeks before we're scheduled to go, I don't know what compelled me. I call him in, only Gabriel. I sit him down, I said, hey, did you ask permission of your parole officer to go to Washington, D.C.? He goes, of course I did. I said, good, you know, I'm just checking. Yeah, she said no. I go, Gabriel, when are we going to get around to telling me this? Well, I wasn't going to tell you. I was afraid you wouldn't let me go. Like a little kid, you know. I go, Mikko, we got to do this the right way. You sit down. What's the number? So with him there, I call this woman. I give the spiel. Howard University, conference, national, suits, dinner, White House, First Lady. And the woman says, nope, high control. High control parole, which means, of course, a hyper-vigilance. He's not going anywhere. I said, gosh, could I talk to, like, your supervisor? She transfers the call, and I give the spiel one more time. And when I'm finished, he says, no way, this is a high control parolee. I said, wow, is there somebody like a notch above you? And it sends me to the notch guy, and I give the spiel one more time. And the guy says, let me be really clear with you. This guy is not leaving the state of California. He is a high control parolee. And they all seem to be having a very bad case of, and Gabriel, who exactly did you think you were that you get to go to the White House for dinner? Well, faxes and emails and phone calls from the Department of Justice and the White House and the First Lady's office. And finally, the day before we're scheduled to fly, Gabriel gets permission from his parole officer to go. We were going to go anyway, but I find that permission is preferable, so though not necessary. So we leave on a Tuesday, and And it's mishap after mishap. The homies are all late, so we're suddenly in bumper-to-bumper traffic on our way to LAX. I turned to nobody in particular. Hey, did all of you remember to bring your IDs? Silence. A lone voice from the back seat. Shit. It's Gus. We have to go back and get his ID. Well, we left on a Tuesday and we stayed with my brother and his wife in D.C. and did all the touristy things Tuesday, all day Wednesday. But Thursday was the day of the conference, the day of the dinner, the day of the suits, the day of the White House dinner. And it was on Thursday in the early morning darkness that we discovered that apparently poor old Gabriel, when he was running to my car Tuesday in the early morning darkness, that he had his bag over one shoulder and his Men's Warehouse suit over the other, covered in plastic, open at the bottom. And as he ran to my car, the movement jostled the pants and they slithered off the hanger and they fell unbeknownst to him somewhere on the sidewalk or in the gutter. And some homeless man is liking the way he looks, I guarantee it. And Gabriel, in the darkness of Thursday morning in my brother's house, you could hear this plaintive cry, I don't got no pants. So thank God for my cuñada, my sister-in-law. She was able to jerry-rig a pair of my brother's pants. He looked fine, nobody noticed. And so the conference is over, and the sun is setting, and we walk into the White House, myself and these three guys, suits, ties, tattoos. And there are butlers walking down the halls with trays of long-stem glasses of white wine. And the homies are snatching those puppies as quickly as they can. And there are string quartets and little brass combos in the red room, in the green room, in the blue room, and all the different colored rooms. And it's elegant. And the gold room is where all the food is. It's this incredible buffet. It's a comilonga, as we say in Spanish. Never in my life have I had better food. It was utterly gourmet. It was, I went back like 9 times, you know, a rack of lamb. It was just perfection. Salmon the size of Wisconsin. It had every imaginable food you could ever imagine. And at one point, probably my 7th visit, I'm standing there and Gabriel's standing next to me. And he eyeballs these white potatoes cut lengthwise with a hole carefully bored out in the middle, stuffed with caviar and a sprig of chive. And he pops that sucker in his mouth. Spits the mess into a napkin. This shit tastes nasty. And let me just say that he wasn't using his inside voice at the time. And was it me or did the Secret Service lunge ever so slightly at precisely this exact moment? Anyway, this is why it's shaggy, because I told you all that to tell you this. The next day we're flying home, and we're in mid-country somewhere, and Gabriel says, I gotta go to the baño. I said, well, Miko, the bathroom's at the back of the plane. 45 minutes later, he comes back. Oye, cabrón, ¿qué pasó? I thought you fell in, okay? Oh, I was just talking to that lady back there. And I turn around and I see the flight attendant standing by herself at the back of the plane. I made her cry. I hope that's okay. I go, Gabriel, it might depend on what you actually said to this woman. Well, she saw my Homeboy Industries shirt and she saw my tattoos. I don't know. She asked me a gang of questions. So I gave her a tour of the office at 34,000 feet. Gabriel walks this woman through the office, introduces her to the job developers, hands her goggles so she can watch tattoos being removed, hands her a hairnet so she can observe enemy gang members baking bread together. And I told her last night we made history. For the first time in the history of this country, 3 gang members walked into the White House. We had dinner there. I told her the food tasted nasty. And she cried. I said, well, Gabriel, what you expect? She just caught a glimpse of you. She saw that you are somebody. She recognized you as the shape of God's heart. People cry sometimes when they see that. And suddenly kinship so quickly. Two souls return to themselves. Two souls feeling their worth. Flight attendant, gang member, 34,000 feet. It's mutual. That you may be one. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it. Thank you very much. Thank you. I yield the balance of my time, which seems to be 9 minutes, to your questions. Yes, sir.
Two questions. One is, what is your succession plan? And the second is, when you look at the Middle East problem with the communication and kinship issues that we're all aware of, how what you've learned, what you've been blessed with, could apply to that Middle East situation, and maybe have another answer on how to resolve the conflicts there?
Succession plan. I don't know. I want this homie named Hector to take over. He sits at my desk when I'm not there, and I'm not there a lot. I think he's a genius. I think he's brilliant. He can learn the other stuff, whatever the other stuff is, business or whatever, management. But the hard part is kind of knowing how to deal with the homies, and that's the hardest part. And he's a genius. So my hope is, my board always says, you don't have a succession plan. I said, yeah, I have one, you just don't like it. So I'm sticking around long enough so that they can see what I see in this guy, who I'd love to have take over. The Middle East and gang, nothing could be more different. This is where I sort of take exception with a lot of the approaches that are currently embraced in the country, where they sit down entities as if they're nation states, gangs, and working stuff out. And peacemaking requires conflict, and there is no conflict in gang violence, there's only violence. It's about a lethal absence of hope. So it's a language, it's not about anything. It's pointing beyond itself to the fact that we need to address the undergirding issues. So peacemaking with gangs is a little bit like giving assurances to a lung cancer patient that give me 6 months and I can quiet your cough. And it could work, but it wouldn't help. The patient's going to die because you're not addressing the cancer. So that's the way it works with gangs. The outsider view says, let's sit them down and have them work it out. But that is decidedly an outsider view. Now gang members say, yeah, let's do it. But that's because it's difficult for gang members to self-present in a way that's accurate and honest. And it takes a really long time for gang members to come to terms, is what I call it. So in the meantime, there's a lot of what happens with alcoholics, romancing the drink. That happens with gang members, you know, romancing the drink would be, hey, remember that time, how did we get home that night? You were wearing a lampshade, etc., etc. Ha, ha, ha. What you're not coming to terms with is that your wife left you, your kids hate you, and you're unemployed because of your disease. That's what you're not coming to terms with. And that's part of the task at Homeboy Industries, is to come to terms, redefine who you are in the world, restore something truthful, repair attachment, heal. Then they can go out into the world after having been with us, and the world will throw at them what it will, and it won't topple them. But that's why we don't work with gangs. We work only with gang members. And I refuse to begin a paragraph whose first sentence is the following. Gangs will always be with us, so you might as well have peace treaties, truces, ceasefires. I used to do this in the projects. That was then. I don't regret it. I'd never do it again. It serves the cohesion of the gang. It supplies oxygen to gangs. And nobody in my community wants to begin a paragraph with gangs will always be with us. You don't speak for my community if you begin the paragraph that way. People in my community, which is a hot zone where I live, long for the day when gangs aren't part of the landscape. When gang is not part of the multiple choice for their kid. A, go to college. B, learn a trade. C, join a gang. If you went to my community, which is packed with gang members, and ask every single one who lives there, including the gang members, close your eyes, imagine the community you want for your kid. Okay, you got it? Open your eyes. Were there gangs there? Even the gang members would say no. They won't open their eyes and say, yeah, there were gangs, but they were really getting along with each other. They won't say that. And that's very telling, it seems to me. And so, anyway, that's sort of a thing for me. Yes, ma'am.
I read some time ago, a year or so ago, that Homeboy Industries was about to close its doors at that time if they didn't receive immediate donations or financial help. And I just wondered how you're doing, financially, and what can people do to help?
Yeah, the question is about our finances. In May, we had Black Thursday where I laid off 313 homies. And so we've definitely stabilized, and we're doing well, and we're healthy relative to this economy. But we moved into this huge place, and suddenly we quadrupled the number of people who sought our services, and it was just insane. And so we couldn't keep up. I remember Dick Reardon said to me, what was your capital campaign? And I said, or no, what was your largest gift? And I said, $2 million. Then he said, your capital campaign should have been $20 million. And it was 12. And I think he was right, but how do you know until the whole campaign's over, and then you look back and go, well, that was our largest gift. So we undercapitalized our venture. That's what happened, basically. And to say nothing of the fact that we really don't get state, federal, city support, which is dumb because we are the county's aftercare program. We are the city's reentry program. We are, there is no program like it in the country. And we don't really get any money from public entities, so we have to hustle. That's wrong, and I hope it'll change.
Another thing I just want to say very quickly is, I know that here in Malibu we have camps. We have Camp Miller and a couple of camps for kind of last chance for young people who are either at risk or have already been involved in gang activities. And is there any way to help these groups or anybody there who would like to enter into your type of industry? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I mean, yeah, out in the Malibu area, she was mentioning that there's Camp David Gonzalez, Miller, and Kilpatrick, very, very close to here, and a lot of you go there already. I encourage you doing that. Loving, caring adults who show up and pay attention, that's sort of a key thing. And the only delivery system I know for delivering hope to kids for whom it's foreign are human beings with pulses, so all hands on deck, everybody needs to help, What we do is a very specific thing. It amplifies hope, and it announces a message. What if we were to invest in folks rather than endlessly seek to incarcerate our way out of this problem? So that's an important message. It's not about meeting every need, it's about announcing that message. So then employers get the idea, hey, I could employ 2 people. huge. What a huge impact that it would have. And it announces a message to gang members who are active. Gosh, maybe I could stop doing this. And I have a place to go when I'm ready to do it. Yes, sir, back there.
Yes, I used to work for a nonprofit organization where we used to take in gang members, and when we find out when they were on our site, we would teach them construction skills and they'd get paid for it. When they were on our site, they would do really well, but when they got home, they had to do a lot of external factors, as far as other gangs or even being in their home situation. How do you combat that? How do you give them the skills they need while they're on your site, on your job, so they can transcend all the external noises that go on in their community?
That's an excellent question. I think our motto in the 25 years ago was still on our T-shirts. You know, nothing stops a bullet like a job. Well, it feels sort of creaky to me now because there's so much more that needs to be done than just the job. You know, you really have to. Community trumps gang, so you have to have a palpable experience of community. A kid came in today. He was waiting to see me, and he works for me, and I hadn't seen him around for a while. And I called him in. He was the next person in, and I said, "So what are you doing? Did you quit?" He goes, "No, I work in the bakery." I didn't even know he had moved to the bakery from our headquarters, you know. And I said, "So what's up?" And I'm, you know, expecting him to say, you know, I can't pay my light bill or something. And he said, "Nothing. I just came by to say I love this place. This is my day off from the bakery. I just like being here. I like what's happening to me." He said, "I like my transformation," is what he said. And it just made my whole day and completely startled me. And I kept waiting. "And you need how much money?" No, he didn't need any money. He just wanted to say thanks. And that's part of because it's not just a job. It's about attachment repair, and it's about therapy, and it's about group stuff, and about everybody has to have this experience of being held by the place that will not let you go, by a place that will not drop you. And that's important. So as you navigate the things, the external things at home, you may well have to escape them. You may well have to relocate, you know. And it's that whole, if you sit around in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. So you may have to move to another place. We help them do that. Case managers, therapists, everybody's kind of evaluating exactly where you are today so that folks can redefine and move beyond and engage in a different kind of life. How about one last question?
Hi. Has any other cities contacted you for a blueprint for what you do here? And are there programs similar?
Yeah, there are a lot of programs that are similar, that are modeled after Homeboy, and we didn't want to kind of set up Homeboy or airlift ourselves into other cities, but we've given what we call technical assistance, where they do much of the same stuff that we do. Wichita, Spokane, Chicago, Miami, Pritchard, Alabama. How about one last final? Yes, ma'am.
When Homegirl Cafe first started, I was curious to know how you got the word out to the public, and has it been as successful as you originally planned? Word
out to the public to come and eat there? Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know how we got the word out. I mean, like, we tried dinner, and dinner didn't work. Downtown's a funny thing, right? You know, because it's sometimes it works, and we're just too far on the fringes of downtown to have it work. Though we're 2 blocks from Philippe's, which seems to have been doing very well for the last 400 years or however long it's been there. French dip sandwiches. So, but people know it's a who's who. I mean, at lunch, you know, not just Diane Keaton, but you're going to bump into a lot of people. People come in, and I walked in there, I hardly ever have lunch there because it's too distracting for me. And I'm always worried about get the coffee to the person over there, and I just can't do it, so I have enough stress. But I walked through there because I saw a cop out front, and I went, "Oh no, the chief." So I walk in, and there's Chief Beck waiting for a table, and I was like, "Give a table first, give a table. Don't let him wait, thank you. Hi, sure, come on in," you know. And so we tossed people out to put the chief in the seat. Not quite that bad, but. Anyway, I want to end on some other note. Mary.
The sale of the salsa and the chips at Ralph's?
The salsas and chips are great, doing great, you know, leave no salsa behind, so snatch those puppies up. And who knows, you know, if it becomes Paul Newman's own suddenly, and along with the book. Did I mention the book? Yeah. So then we could keep our doors open and not worry. Then we'd be endowed and I could sleep. So thank you very much.